Professor, good morning. I'm pretty excited. We're going up to my old neighborhood with today's topic.
We are indeed. This is your neck of the woods. Now, I assume that, like most folks, you were glued to the TV over the weekend watching some pro football, playoff football action.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
No question about it.
It's one of those times a year, like even if you're not a big football fan, you start watching now as you get into playoff season and leading up to the big game. So I think everyone's kind of a buzz of what's happening when it comes to pigskin football.
Yeah, and back in the day, now the season is longer. It used to be 14 games in a regular season. Well, now it's longer, plus a bye, plus another week of the playoffs. It used to be that by this time of year, we'd already be done with the Super Bowl.
Right. Now they have to make some more money with all these extra games.
Got to play these players.
They make more money, and now it's in February, so TV ratings play a role, all of these things. That's one big reason why the season is even longer than it used to be. But despite the length of the season, there has only been one National Football League team in history that won the Super Bowl as an undefeated champion, and that would be 17-0. Talking, of course, about the Miami Dolphins as they capped their 1972 perfect regular season with a win in Super Bowl number 7 on this date in 1973. Super Bowl 7, what are we up to now, 53?
Yes, we are, 53, absolutely.
Well, we're talking about it today because one of the stalwarts from that team was a young man from Iowa. Vern Den Herder was born in Le Mars in 1948. The Sioux Center High School graduate played his college football at Central College in Pella back when they had those massively strong national championship teams in the 60s into the 70s and beyond. He was a 9th-round draft pick for Miami. Now, that would not happen today because they don't have that many rounds in the draft. But back then, they went as far as 9 rounds. Now, during his rookie year, like many, he played primarily on special teams, but Den Herder became a starting defensive end just before that magical 1972 season started. And the Dolphins had incentive. They had just lost to Dallas in the Super Bowl the year before, and they were looking to avenge that loss by hoisting the Lombardi Trophy for themselves. Did they ever avenge that loss? They won all 14 regular season games, 2 playoff games, and then, of course, the Super Bowl over Washington 14-7. There are various plays that people remember from that game, but it was a tackle by Vern Den Herder near the end of the game that sealed the win and the perfect season for Miami. Dolphins went on to win the Super Bowl the next year as well. All told, Vern Den Herder played in 3 Super Bowls for Miami before he retired for good after the 1982 season.
Yeah, that was a surprise when we talked about this earlier. 14-7 was the score of the game. It was that close.
Absolutely. But despite retirement and obviously being a big fan of Miami, he was an Iowan through and through.
Still lives up there in your neck of the woods in Sioux Center, still engaged in farming. It's traditional for championship sports teams to come to the White House for a ceremony with the president. Well, that undefeated Dolphins team never got a ceremony because the president at the time, President Nixon, was a little preoccupied with the Watergate scandal.
Oh, so he was a little busy. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that he probably would have desperately loved to do a ceremony. But the other thing, President Nixon was a big Redskins fan, Washington Redskins fan. And there's a famous story about how he sent plays to Coach George Allen. So
really?
He actually did. And they actually used one of them in a game.
Oh, wow.
What, do you think he has some kind of influence? Is that the deal?
He's like, we're calling this the Watergate.
And of course, George Allen, with his history coaching at Morningside, et cetera. Well,
right.
In any event, whether it was Watergate, whether it was because he was a sore loser because he was rooting for the Redskins, there was no White House ceremony. But to mark the 40th anniversary of that team, President Obama invited the members of the 1973 Miami Dolphins to the White House just 6 years ago in 2013. But Vern Den Herder couldn't make it because he was needed on the farm in Iowa. It was harvest time.
Really?
And so he opted to stay here. So here we are more than 40 years later, almost 50 years later, still only one undefeated Super Bowl champion. And an Iowan was a big part of that Super Bowl, the NFL championship game on this date in 1973.
I love it. And this is something we've heard of before, as we have Adam Timmerman, who is from Cherokee, Iowa, just about 30 minutes from Lamar's. When he wasn't playing football, he came back to the family farm and he was working. And when he finally retired, after playing, I believe, in 2 Super Bowls, that's what he did. He came back to Iowa and started to go back onto the farm. So there's something about what we do here that people really get passionate about, even though they can go off and do some pretty amazing things.
Well, this is home, and you always look around, try to improve yourselves. And when you go elsewhere, you look back and say, you know, I was pretty good where I was. and if you can go back to living the life that's a good life after you've gone off, whether it's play football or race cars, or whether it's practicing law or something, if you come back here to raise the family and have a great quality of life, I'm sounding like a tourism Chamber of Commerce brochure here.
You'll be glad that you did. But again, a lot of people are going to be talking about the undefeated Miami Dolphins, 72 into 73 Miami Dolphins, but especially with the playoffs that are going on right now. And to know that there's an Iowa connection that is that tight and that strong makes it even more special, doesn't it?
Absolutely does. And, you know, there's a story that the members of the team, they don't want anybody to beat this record, right? And so every year when the last undefeated team loses for the first time, whether it's in week 6 or week 10 or whatever, there's a group of them that get together and pop a cork on a bottle of champagne to toast themselves, because they'll know their record is safe for another year.
And I can verify that when I was going to the University of Miami, every time that happened, there was college students that would be like, all right, it's time to pop the champagne. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they would talk about the undefeated season. So that tradition does still continue.
Yeah, records are made to be broken,
but maybe that just sounds like an excuse.
Hey, just because we were in college doesn't mean that was, a thing that they're still very much proud of. And how fun is it? And should be.
Yeah.
But how much fun is it just to say the name Vern Dern Herter?
It's not as easy as it seems.
We just proved that just now.
Good old Dutch name, Vern Dern Herter.
All right, so
love it.
People want to go back to get all the details about what you just talked about, and then again, that tackle that could have saved the game for them. Where can they go find that information, sir?
IowaAlmanac.com. Try being the live play-by-play announcer, tripping over names like this. IowaAlmanac.com. Also Twitter and Instagram at IowaAlmanac.
He was just known as VDH. VDH does this or VDH does that. So
Vernon Herter. Vernon Herter.
Make it a lot easier. All right, sir. Thank you so much.
That sounds like the drinking game after you pop the champagne.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning.
All right. Thanks.
Have a great
Thank you,
one.
Professor.
Well,